Yes, Emil Kadlec here, Football Diehards DFS Sunday show, Week 13 of the NFL season. We're here with the popular and talented Jason Brady and the old man of fantasy football, myself, Emil Kadlec. Brady, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty solid, coming off of a very good week thanks to one Tyreek Hill, and hopefully keep it going this week. Lots of interesting plays we're going to talk about, and let's get into it. I'm excited.
Yeah, I guess you did pretty good last week. I had a couple of victories in my $1 picks. I guess I got to start trying that GPP. So you want to start with quarterbacks?
Yeah, let's do it. So quarterback's very interesting this week because not really plays really jump out at you. So I don't think the ownership on one guy is going to be overly crazy this week. But I do want to start with somebody up top, and that is Deshaun Watson, 7,500 versus the Colts. You got a 51.5 point game total where the Texans are 3-point underdogs, and Watson's averaging 25.5 DraftKings points per week, and he has been on fire as of late. So the big thing here is he's going to be missing Will Fuller, but still has great options to throw to. Fantastic stacking options with Cooks and Akudia there. And not the best matchup this week against the Colts, but there really aren't many great options at QB, like I said. So I think Watson has one of the best upsides this week. So something I'm really looking forward to playing at 7,500 is a Watson stack this week, and that Texan stack, because I think the wide receiver options are way too cheap.
So you're not that worried about losing Fuller in this matchup or in this playing Watson?
I mean, it's worrying, but man, Cooks and Cudi are so cheap that, man, it makes it so easy to stack that.
Yeah, I guess Kuti, or however you pronounce it, I still can't pronounce it after 3 years. He's going to be a good play, and of course we'll get to that later. And now, Watson is the third most owned quarterback this week in DFS, at 8.3%. What do you think about that?
Yeah, kind of expected. I thought it would be a little bit lower owned because, like you mentioned, no Will Fuller. How's that going to affect him? So definitely some question marks there for sure.
Cool. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Watson can do this week and, of course, the remainder of the weeks this year without Fuller. See who steps up. Some of the tight ends may step up. It's been a lot of talk, which wouldn't surprise me. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Watson this week.
Yes. So going down a little bit, and at 6,800, you have Aaron Rodgers versus the Eagles. A 47-point game total here where the Packers are 9-point favorites. And Rodgers is averaging 25.5 DraftKings points per week this year, as is Watson there. And, great stackable options. Adams being my favorite. You have Lazard there. You have Robert Tonyan. That's a good option as well. So I'm really liking this Rodgers stack. I mean, Rodgers in an Adams stack specifically there. And just a solid matchup here at home versus Philadelphia. You get decent savings off of the top guys. And like I mentioned, great stackable options to pair him with in tournament. So Rodgers is somebody I'm looking at just for the price and for the matchup there.
And he's one step ahead of Deshaun Watson on the ownership. He's the second most owned quarterback at 10%. Just below, well, we'll get to it later. We'll tease that number one owned quarterback, which will probably surprise a few people. Yeah, Rodgers has really been on a roll this year, and in our Prop Till You Drop show with Jen Ryan, his over and under is 2.5 touchdowns, and she thinks he's going to go over that, and he has a lot this year, so it's a good situation for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, it's interesting because we usually don't see Rodgers high owned. I mean, usually it's guys like Murray, guys like Russell Wilson, guys like Deshaun Watson. So hearing that Rodgers is the second highest owned, that's kind of different this week.
Oh yeah, there's a bit of a shuffle this week in ownership. It's going to be fun to watch a few more here that we'll get to in a moment.
Yep. So next we have Ryan Tannehill, 6,200 versus Cleveland. You got the 54-point game total, which I believe is one of the highest on the slate, if not the highest on the slate. So the Titans are 5.5-point favorites, and Tannehill is averaging 20.9 DraftKings points per game. You got a fantastic matchup against this Cleveland passing defense. I do believe Denzel Ward's going to be out, which I think is going to hurt the Cleveland defense even more. So great stackable options. You got Brown, Furster, Davis, all guys we'll talk about today. And stacking the Titans passing game gets you off of that Derrick Henry chalk. So just touchdown upside in general, in a game that's supposed to score very, very high here. So Tannehill is something I'm definitely looking at for the price. I love the stacking options, and the matchup's fantastic.
Yeah, he's an interesting play this week. He's at home against Cleveland. He's at 7.5% owned, the fifth most owned quarterback. A guy who, this is a big game for both these teams. I think they're both 8-3 or whatever it is. I mean, we're getting to the point this year where these are extremely important games, making the playoffs and playoff position. So it's going to be fun to watch this guy, and I like Tannehill. I think this is a good matchup, and I like being at home also. So 7.5% owned, whatever that means. What do you think about that?
It's not bad. It's not bad. What you say is fifth highest owned, right?
Fifth highest owned.
Yeah, not bad there.
Perfect.
All right, so getting into the next play, and we have Jared Goff, and this is really interesting here. I can't believe this price: 5,800 versus Arizona, and a 48.5 point game total, where the Rams are 3-point favorites, and Goff is averaging 18.7 DraftKings points per game. And I just love the price of Goff here. At 5,800 seems way too cheap. He's got a great matchup against his Arizona defense. Arizona has given up the third most DraftKings points to opposing quarterbacks. And all of his stacking options are way too cheap, and we'll talk about them as well. Woods, Kupp, Reynolds. I think it's really easy to go out there and stack Jared Goff with a Kupp and a Reynolds or a Kupp and a Reynolds. And the run back options are solid as well. So Goff, a stack, is something I'm definitely looking at this week.
Yeah, he had, let me go look real quick. I didn't have that up. He scored, he was a disaster last week. I mean, he went from scoring like 20-some-odd 8 points the week before to literally people talking about he should have been benched, So I think that he is so all over the place in his career. His floor can be extremely low. And they were home last week against San Francisco, which usually he does better at home. Well, he's owned at 6.6%. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh owned quarterback, 2 below Tannehill. So that's 5,800. I mean, this is a great opportunity for him to bounce back, and he can bounce back. And again, I'm going to say this a couple times today: huge game for Arizona and the Rams this week. So, yeah, hopefully he can bounce back. The coach had when Bob Harris was talking about when they asked the coach whether he was going to bench him or whether he thought of benching him, it wasn't a quick no. It was this paragraph answer, which kind of shocked you. Like, is he really seriously considering benching this guy? Maybe he was just trying to put a fire under his butt. But obviously the ownership has dropped and the salary has dropped, and this could be a great play for Goff.
Yep, you see it a lot of times. These guys have poor games the week before. People get off of them. The ownership goes down. The price goes down. They go out there and they bounce back. So I definitely think that's one of these spots here.
Very tempting.
All right, and then Mitchell Trubisky in 5,400 versus Detroit. You got the 44-point game total where the Bears are 3-point favorites. And, yeah, Trubisky is averaging 14.8 DraftKings points per week. And you got an extremely good matchup here against the Lions. Nice stackable option with Allen Robinson, who is cheap as well, 6,700. And the Lions defense have given up the 7th most DraftKings points to opposing quarterbacks. Just an extremely cheap play here against a very poor defense. I know Trubisky is not the best play in the world, but Trubisky typically does very well against Detroit, which is interesting. He typically throws a ton to Allen Robinson, which is interesting as well. And it's not the prettiest play in the world, but I think it's fine at this price here. Just a decent punt.
Yeah, we're going to find out. Robinson's been dinged up, and I don't think he's, we know for sure whether he's going to play. I think it's a morning game. Yeah, it's a morning game, so we're going to know, which is very important. I think Robinson's important for Trubisky. The rookie, Mooney, that guy has got some speed, but you really need Robinson, I think, to push the envelope for Trubisky. And, it's kind of bizarre we're talking about starting Trubisky. I feel real awkward about it. He's 6.9% owned. He's actually just slightly above Goff and just slightly below Tannehill in ownership. So people are definitely seriously considering Trubisky this week in DFS.
Ain't that something?
And he's performed, recently, and anyway, it's a weird feeling. It's almost like you start him in a couple of your DFSs and you don't even want to watch. You just wait to the end of the end of Sunday and say, okay, did I blow it or did I make a big move? Because he's definitely could be all over the place, but he has performed and he could have a big game, and that is a good opportunity. $5,400 is a tempting number in a salary.
Very. So the other guy I want to talk about is, I don't know, Tua. If Tua does not play, he's questionable. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick against the Bengals is going to be a really good play. So just look out for Tua. Questionable right now. I think it's at like a game time decision. If Tua's out, like I'm going to be all over Fitzpatrick at 6,000. I like a stack of options with Devontae Parker. So just look out for that. Have you heard any news about Tua playing or not? I haven't seen anything as of now.
Yeah, I think he's expected to start, according to Bob Harris here at footballdiehards.com. Early morning on Sunday, he's expected to start. And that typically means he's probably going to start. Now, where is that game? I should have that memorized. That is an early game, so you're going to know. You're going to know, and you're going to know where to go, which is great. I love early games to make decisions. So it's leaning Tua. But we'll be able to know, and we'll be able to push that number. Let me go look at, of course, that's going to change ownership a lot. Tua right now is only 2% owned, but that, like I said, that could change. I don't even see, where's our Fitzpatrick? If I wasn't dyslexic, I could find Fitzpatrick real quickly. But
it's probably not owned much right now, but yeah.
Actually, he may not even be on the list right now. So people are sitting back waiting, I think, till later on this morning. Interesting situation. I don't really trust Tua right now myself if he starts. So
nope.
I almost feel disappointed if he's going to start. What a feeling.
Yep, I'm exactly the same way there. Was there anybody else you wanted to throw out at quarterback? Those are my main ones I'm going to this week.
What's interesting, and I guess understanding, is Kyler Murray has come back to earth the last few weeks, and I think he's been hurt. I mean, he's supposed to have been hurt, and I think that's made a difference. He's at 2% owned.
Ain't that something, man?
Boy, God is maybe we throw him in a small percentage of your lineups, because for GPP that's very low owned. I'm just. But, he hasn't performed well. But, again, as we talked before, huge conference game for these guys. And, sometimes they're going to go to this guy. They talk about he doesn't have to run and all this. He hasn't been running. Well, they need to win this game. And so I don't think they're going to be worried about percentage versus pass versus run. The question is, do we really believe Kyler Murray is healthy now, healthy enough to perform at close to his top level? Because 2% owned is very low. I don't know if $7,600, you could tell me whether that's a good price from the last few weeks, because I haven't tracked that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like 2%, it's crazy to think that Murray is only 2% owned. So he was 8,200 in week 12, 8,500 in week 11. He's now sitting at 7,600, so a big price decrease here. I think he's the cheapest he's been since week 7. So something to think about. Like you mentioned, maybe throwing him in some lineups. The matchup's kind of tough against the Rams, but man, if Murray can bounce back this week, he's going to be low owned, and he definitely has that ability to.
Yeah, it would be tempting to get him in a small percentage of your ownership, in your GPP. Personally, now I'm not. You're the GPP guy. I'm the host.
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing multiple lineups at 2%, you got to throw some Murray in there for sure. But
yeah,
if you're doing just like 1 or 2, maybe 3 lineups, I probably wouldn't play him. But multiple lineups, yeah, I think it's a good idea for sure.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's the other quirky player I thought that we should mention this morning.
So who is the number 1 owned quarterback for this week?
Kirk Cousins for Minnesota.
Really?
10.5%. 10.6%, the number 1 owned quarterback against Jacksonville. He's been hot. He's been hot lately.
Yes.
He's been
definitely a solid play there.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, solid play there against Jacksonville. Wow.
Kirk Cousins, the number 1 quarterback in DFS.
Never thought I'd see that, but there you go.
Well, he had some rough starts. He had a 2-point game, a fantasy point game week 2. I don't have it in front of me. And he's just traditionally been a guy recently that he's a game manager. If they're running the ball with Cook, he can have bad games. But, he's got Thielen back, and Thielen's it's like he just lives in the end zone. Jefferson is a fantastically talented player who, has had big games. Smith is out, so Rudolph had a good game last week. I think he scored 14 fantasy points without scoring a touchdown, so he's another guy. I don't know if we'll talk about him later. Remind me, because he is definitely an interesting play this week. So, that was another quirky scenario there for the quarterbacks.
Sweet. All right, so we'll get into the running backs here. And up top, we got to talk about him. Dalvin Cook, 9,500 versus the Jaguars. You got the 52-point game total here, where the Vikings are 9.5-point favorites. And he's averaging 27 DraftKings points per week. He did have a poor game last week. He screwed a lot of people, including me, in cash games, which could definitely lower his ownership. And another great matchup here against one of the worst run defenses in the league. And 30-plus touch upside, including some pass-catching upside as well for Cook here. Touchdown upside, scoring 14 touchdowns on the year. And you really can't ask for a better matchup against this Jaguars defense. You can't ask for a better game script with them being out, being 9.5-point favorites. And I'm assuming he's going to be probably the highest owned running back. I don't see why he wouldn't be here. So what's his ownership here? I think in cash games, I'm probably going to go there. In tournaments, you can definitely get away from it. 9,500, he's going to have to score a ton to really smash value there. But I think cash is the safe play there.
Yeah, number one owned running back, Dalvin Cook, 23% owned, which it's pretty high.
Yep, definitely high. I think last week was 30% around there?
Yeah, it was insane. It's gone down. Obviously, you have a bad game, but obviously, like you said, Jacksonville is going to be well owned this week, and like you said, in cash, you probably want to put him in a significant portion of your lineups. He's a hot player. Everything points to a great game there.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me is the coach came out and said that he's really beat up or something. So that's kind of concerning there, but he should do fine.
And then Cook came out and was a little upset that the coach said that. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe he is a little beat up, but I think Cook really wants to prove. I mean, last year he missed a game late in the season, and I think he wants to prove that he is one of the top players. As a matter of fact, I think he came out, Bob Harris told me that he came out and said that nobody asks Henry if he's tired or beat up. So I think he wants to prove. I think Cook wants to prove something, and so I think he's a very tempting play this week in cash.
I like it. So going down to what I think is probably the second or third highest owned running back here, and that's going to be Derrick Henry, 9,200 versus Cleveland. You got that 54-point game total, one of the highest on the slate. And the Titans are 5.5-point favorites, which works well in Henry's favor here. Just a solid matchup against the Browns. Should be out ahead in most of the game, leading to more Henry touches. You got that touchdown upside in what is one of the highest, if not the highest total on the slate. You got that 100-yard plus upside for Henry here as well. There's a great ceiling for Henry. I don't think the floor is the best due to not much pass-catching upside, but the ceiling's definitely there. Definitely a solid tournament play there. If it was between Cook and Henry and cash, I'd probably lean towards Cook. But in tournaments, I think they're both in play here, and I will be having some Henry this week.
Yeah, let me look real quick. Let's see. Henry actually caught 2 balls last week for 7 yards. Along with his 9, what did he have? 178 yards and 3 touchdowns in the running game. Anyway. Yeah, he's the number 4 owned running back this week. 18.5%, definitely chalk. Not surprising. It's a high salary, but this guy, he seems to be a high performer. He has developed from last year into this year, a high performer in the second half of the season. So, he's a tough guy to not play in your cash games, at least at some percentage. Because he has proven that he's a, great player in the end of the season.
Yes, for sure. All right, so getting to the next play here, and a big drop off in salary, which is really interesting because I really do like these next couple plays coming up. And you got James Robinson here, 7,300, which is 1,900 less than Derrick Henry. Going against Minnesota here, you got the 50.5 point game total where the Jaguars are 10-point underdogs. And typically you'd be concerned when a running back is a 10-point underdog, but they still find ways to get Robinson the ball when they're down. They've thrown the ball, has that pass catching upside. He's averaging 19.5 DraftKings points per week, and a decent matchup against this Minnesota defense. And like I said, like the touches are there. He's the number one guy, the clear number one guy on the Jaguars team here at running back. Not other running backs get many touches, so Robinson, I really like it just for the volume alone. The game script is not the best, but the matchup is pretty good there, so I like Robinson a lot.
Yeah, last week he had 22 carries. Chenault, a wide receiver, had 1 carry. The quarterback, Glennon, had 2 carries. So, yes, he's the man who gets the carries, got the touchdown, and, like you said, he has 6 targets, caught 5 balls, 31 yards. So you're getting, 8 points sugar on PPR there with him. And like you said, if they get into a situation where they're passing, he will be one of them that gets perhaps maybe in a couple more targets. 16% owned. He's the 5th owned running back. Not surprising. He's shown that he's the guy there. He's shown that he can have big games. At Minnesota, I don't think Minnesota's a great defense yet. They're getting better, but he's a tempting guy to play, definitely. He's got the numbers. The salary. So did you say the salary has gone up from the last week or two?
Yeah, I just said that it was cheaper than Henry, but last week he was 6,300, so actually a 1,000 price jump from last week. Yeah. And I remember I was all over him last week, and it worked out great. He scored 29.9 DraftKings points, but yep, they priced him up big time here.
But he's still the 5th most owned at 16%, so it's probably a reduction because of that increase in salary. But I think obviously other people still believe this guy is going to produce, and he's getting the targets, he's getting the touches, and you got to just decide whether you're worried about it being at Minnesota, and like you said, the game script, if they are behind, but we still think he'll go to that guy even though they're behind. So tempting. Yes. Too bad his salary went up a bit, but maybe there's a way you can find a way to get him into your lineups.
I know, right? All right, the next guy here, again, just Austin Eckler, 7,100. Another guy that got priced up big time from last week. I think it was 6,100 last week. Going against New England here, 47-point game total where the Chargers are a point favorite. And Eckler is averaging 17.2 DraftKings points. He returned from injury last week, and that was all over him. He scored 23.9 DraftKings points with no touchdowns. So, man, the floor is definitely there with Eckler. 16 targets last week, 11 receptions for 25 total touches. Coming off of injury, it's very impressive there. He looked really good. And I just love the floor he brings in general. I love his pass-catching upside. You got a decent matchup here at home versus this Pats defense that has been struggling. So Eckler at 7,100, I like it a lot. I'm curious to hear the ownership. Hopefully he's not crazy owned, but last week he wasn't even that owned. I think people were scared that he was coming off an injury, but now that he's back, I think that he should be kind of high owned here. But what is he?
The guy comes back for how many weeks off? Obviously you're going to be concerned, but it's interesting how when we take these chances, a lot of times they work out. He's the 3rd most owned running back at 18%. So, obviously, I can't believe he had 16 targets. That's not going to happen again. But obviously, what a difference a quarterback makes. Week 1, I think he was targeted once, and I don't even think he caught the ball. If the guy can go look real quick, but nonetheless, Tyrod Taylor, the first 2 weeks of the season, he was not, it just didn't happen. And this rookie, I can't believe this rookie is playing so well. And aren't they playing at New England, which is, New England's a sneaky tough defense, and they like to take away a player of the other team. Yes. They like to take away the most important player. Is Eckler already the most important player, or are they going to try and take away Allen? I think that's an important question to ask yourself and to determine how much you want to play Eckler, because are they going to go after Eckler or are they going to go after Allen? What do you think about that, Brady?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but I was thinking they'd probably go after Allen. But yeah, Eckler's a big threat as well, so you never know what that defense is going to do and try to stop who. So it could be Eckler, it could be Allen. Good point there.
Yeah, I would think they would try and take away Allen, but we're going to find out in a few hours. But yeah,
Yes.
that's a concern. But it's so great to see Eckler in there with a great quarterback. That was one of the worries I had about Eckler going in. I didn't like Taylor. I mean, I like the guy. He's a starting quarterback. He's had a nice career, but he's just not a great quarterback. And wasn't able to utilize Eckler in the first 2 weeks. But yeah, it's a great situation. I'm glad to see Eckler shining. Got to see a way if I can supplant him in a couple of my cash lineups here in the next couple of hours.
Yes. So moving on to Myles Gaskin, 5,900. Very interesting play here. Going against Cincinnati, you got the 42.5-point game total where the Dolphins are 10-point favorites. And Gaskin is averaging 14.2 DraftKings points per week. He's returning from the IR. And Ahmed and Washington are both doubtful to play. So giving Gaskin a lot of opportunity here in his first game back in a while. And yeah, I like the price here for Gaskin. I like the matchup. I like the game script with them being favorites. Like I said, Dolphins should be out ahead, leading to more carries for Gaskin. I'm curious to hear the ownership. A guy returning off of the IR here usually is typically low owned, so I think it could be a decent spot here at 5,900.
Yeah, actually, Ahmed is out, so Patrick Laird is the only other running back, and he's not much of an option. So all of a sudden, Gaskin's finally coming back, who was a really reliable, caught the ball, ran the ball for Miami. He's the guy this week, and sure enough, he's the sixth owned running back this week, 16.4%. Even at $5,900, he's chalk, coming back, but obviously he's going to get opportunity against Cincinnati, and there's nobody else there who's going to be running except for Laird, and I really don't think Laird's going to chip into too much of his play.
Nope. I mean, you can't really ask for a better matchup or a better game script here for Gaskin and a better price, so I like it a lot here.
Sounds good. I'll see if I can't sneak him into some of my lineups.
So two more guys I want to talk about here, starting with Devonte Booker, 5,500 versus the Jets. Got a 47-point game total where the Raiders are 7.5-point favorites. And he's averaging only 6.8 DraftKings points per week, but that is, of course, because of Josh Jacobs, and Josh Jacobs is going to be out this week, giving Booker a huge opportunity here with a very solid matchup, a very solid game script as well. And yeah, the Raiders should be ahead, leading to more carries for Booker. Should see some touchdown opportunities in a game that has a decent total. Just a great cheap running back play here with some solid upside. Probably going to gain some ownership because, yeah, Josh Jacobs is out, and the matchup is fantastic here versus the Jets.
Yeah, Booker's really showed himself over the last few weeks, getting a second chance with the Raiders. He failed in his early part of his career. He is 15% owned. He's fairly high owned, about the ninth owned running back, and it makes sense. There's been plenty of time. Jacobs been out for several days or known to not going to play, so there's opportunity for everybody to take a serious look at Booker. He's not sneaking up on anybody, so he's definitely high owned. He's chalk and has a great opportunity. Like you said, $5,500 is a nice salary to be able to sneak him in there and get some value out of him.
Yes. So, this next play, I'm curious to hear the ownership. I'm assuming it's one of the highest owned plays on the slate, and it's David Montgomery, 5,500 versus Detroit, and a 44-point game total where the Bears are 3-point favorites. Montgomery is averaging 14 DraftKings points per week. He did that massive game last week, scoring 28.3 DraftKings points against Green Bay. Gets an even better matchup here this week against a very bad Detroit run defense. Detroit has given up the most DraftKings points to opposing running backs this year. It's a cheap running back play here with solid upside. What I am concerned about is that ownership that we'll talk about soon. If he's so low owned, it's really hard to get on to David Montgomery. It's really ugly, but the matchup is just so good. What's his ownership? I'm guessing he's the second highest.
He's the second highest, 21%, just below Cook, just above Eckler. We finally got something out of Montgomery. It's incredible. Yes, I have him in one Dynasty League. I just can't wait to get rid of him, and now I'm actually getting some value out of him. Yeah, do we go back to this? I mean, do we go back to this guy? Detroit's a good situation. That's a high ownership, 5,500 though. So yeah, you're right. A good cash play. I've got such a bad memory of him. I wish I could degauss my brain because he's just burned me. And you watch this guy, and he just has no acceleration. But that's a lot of points against Green Bay last week, and perhaps he'll do it again. So perhaps I should forget about the past, except for last week, and put him in a few of my lineups.
Yeah, sounds good. The ownership is extremely concerning. So I'm not going to go overly heavy on Montgomery. I'll definitely have lineups without him, but it's really hard to ignore how good the defense, how good the matchup is here. So, was there anybody else you wanted to throw out at running back? That's all I got for that.
I had those. You hit all my little sneaky ones, and so Gaskin too. So that's all I have actually that I had for sneaky plays. You've covered them.
There we go. All right, so getting into wide receivers here, we're going to start up top with Devonte Adams, who is 9,000 versus the Eagles. You got the 47-point game total where the Packers are 9-point favorites, and Adams is averaging 26.9 DraftKings points per game this year. Just tons of volume for Adams, averaging 11 targets per game. You got that fantastic floor. You got that fantastic ceiling. You got that slate-breaking potential for Adams as well. Good matchup against this Eagles defense. And I'm really liking the Rodgers-Adams stack this week. And I think that it's going to be interesting this week to go up and pay for Adams, because paying for Adams is going to get you off of that Derrick Henry and that Dalvin Cook chalk as something to get different. And usually we'd see Adams at higher ownership. I'm assuming he's going to be a little bit lower owned than usual. So Adams is somebody I'm definitely looking at this week. I think he has a ton of upside here.
Yeah, he's the number 2 owned. He's not number 1 this week. He's the number 2 owned wide receiver, Devonte Adams, 16.9%. I'll leave the number 1 owned for later. Hopefully we'll talk about him. But, yeah, it's not a bad play. Philadelphia's defense played a lot better last week. Mainly more, I guess, against the run from just my recollection is. But I don't think you can stop Devonte Adams. So still a great play. 16%. I think that's a lot lower than it was last week. Is $9,000 salary any different from the last couple of weeks?
So last week he was 8,800. Week 11 he was 8,600. He was 9,000 in week 10. So kind of around the same area there.
Okay, that's not too different.
Yeah. So getting into the next play here, in A.J. Brown, 7,600 versus Cleveland. I actually think this price is a little bit too expensive, but it's really hard to ignore how good of a play Brown is this week. He got that 54-point game total, which is the highest in the slate, where the Titans are 5.5-point favorites. And Brown's averaging 18.2 DraftKings points per week, getting a little bit over 7 targets per game. He has 8 touchdowns in 9 games played. And like I said, Ward is not expected to play this week, which is going to hurt the Browns defense a lot, and a Browns defense that already struggles through the air. So I love the matchup here against the Browns. I like A.J. Brown here at 7,600. I like that Tannehill stack as well.
Yeah, Brown was a little dinged up in practice this week, but Friday he did play fully, and he's not on the injury report. So I would take that as it is and assume that he's ready to go. He's the he's like the 8th most owned wide receiver, 11.6%. This guy's a monster. This guy's really a monster. It all depends on the setup and whether they're, is Henry going to run so much that. But Henry actually helps A.J. Brown, and so I like this play too. 7,600. I don't know how much that's moved, but he's healthy and somewhat chalky, and a really great play, I think.
Yes, I like it. So going down a couple hundred, you got Allen Robinson, 6,700 versus Detroit. You got that 44-point game total where the Bears are 3-point favorites. And Robinson is averaging 17.3 DraftKings points per week, getting about 10 targets per game. That's something I like about Robinson is that he's going to get targeted a ton each week. Got that very good matchup against this Detroit secondary. The Lions have given up to 6 minute DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. And, like we mentioned earlier, the Trubisky-Robinson stack makes it an interesting, cheap stack there. And Mitchell Trubisky loves throwing to Allen Robinson here. So I think the floor is good for Robinson. I think there's some solid upside. Curious to hear the ownership here on Robinson.
11%. So he's around the 1, 2, 3. I should be able to count those. He's the 7th most owned wide receiver at 11%. So And he's expected to play, according to Bob Harris of FootballDiehard.com. And like we said earlier, it's an early game, so you're going to know. You're going to know whether he's active or not and making your decisions. So definitely an important cog in Trubisky and himself. Obviously, he's a great player and he's had great weeks. And he's against Detroit, so very tempting player.
Yes. So, this next play, and I'll talk about a couple of them in one here, and it's the Rams wide receivers in general. And my favorite being Robert Woods, 5,900 versus Arizona, a 48.5-point game total where the Rams are 3-point favorites. And Woods is averaging 17 DraftKings points per week, 7 touchdowns on the year. So in the last 2 weeks, he's had 27 targets. So Goff has been targeting him a ton. Got this fantastic matchup against his Arizona defense, and I really don't mind a Rams stack this week. And like I mentioned earlier, all the Rams wide receivers are way too cheap. Cooper Kupp, just 200 more, I believe, at 6,100. Josh Reynolds, somebody else that's really, really cheap as well. So I think it's really easy to stack this Rams offense, and you get such a good matchup doing so. So Robert Woods, I'm assuming he's going to be one of the highest owned wide receivers on the slate, just due to the price. Like I don't understand this price at all.
Oh yeah, $5,900. He's the fifth most owned wide receiver this week. DFS, 14.9%. So he's up there, but you got to. Goff had a disastrous game at home against 49ers last week. Yet Woods had 12 targets, the most targets of the team. He had 7 catches for 80 yards, didn't score a touchdown, so he got 15 PPR points in a disaster game. Yeah. And he's getting all these targets, and like you said, $5,900 is a very tempting. He's a. I got to get him in some of my lineups this morning because that's just a great situation.
Yes, way too cheap there.
Another guy that's getting as many targets right now. He's last week he only got 5 targets, caught 2 balls, 41 yards. So I mean, Josh Reynolds did just about as well as Cooper Kupp did last week, but Cooper Kupp's fluky. I mean, the guy can go all over. Goff and Kupp are just. He could have a monster game, and it's really hard to predict.
Yeah, that's true. All right, getting into the next play here, and I'm assuming this is, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't, I'm assuming this is the number one wide receiver on the slate, and it's Brandon Cooks, 5,600 versus the Colts. You got the 51.5-point game total where the Texans are 3-point underdogs, and Cooks is averaging 13.2 DraftKings points per week, about 7 targets per game. And the big news here is Fuller is suspended. He's going to be out for the rest of the season, I do believe, and giving Cooks even more opportunity. I mean, the dude was getting more targets than Fuller in the first place, but now that Fuller's out, it's going to be even more beneficial for him. So Stills was cut. Cobb is on the IR. The Texans don't have many options here at wide receiver right now, so I'm really liking the Watson and Cook stack this week. I think there's touchdown upside, which is one of the highest totals on the slate at 51.5 points. So I'm loving Cooks this week, as are a lot of people. I think he's probably like a must-play in cash at this price. I think I'm going to have a ton of him in tournaments as well.
Yeah, you're right. He's the number one owned wide receiver, 20.8%, $5,600 salary. Now, Indianapolis' defense has been a great defense this year. They've kind of slacked off a little bit recently. I still, I've got that my old man brain where I just remember this guy is kind of a candy bone. He was only spent 1 year in New England. They just didn't like the guy. He's got some problems, in my opinion, but he's got the opportunity. But without Fuller, yeah, he's going to get more targets. But are they just going to put guys on this player, Cooks, and he's not going to catch a lot? I worry about it, but maybe I'm over-worrying about it because there's not much else there. So number one owned wide receiver Cooks at 20.9%.
Yeah, as expected for sure. So,
yeah.
Like I said, I think he's a must play in cash at that price. But
now, when
in tournaments, you can
play. Let's say I have 10 cash lineups. How many? What percentage would you put Cook in on 10 lineups for cash?
If I was doing 10 cash lineups, I'd probably do like pretty much most of them, honestly. If I was doing cash, like 50-50 double-ups, I'd probably put them in there like 9 or 10, honestly.
So that's
personally.
Yeah.
But
pretty much lock. Okay. Interesting. I always worry every once in a while when we're absolutely sure a guy should be played. Every once in a while that player underperforms, and I always like to try and think about that a little bit, not get too emotional about it. But anyway, obviously he's got great opportunity and got a great quarterback. They're probably going to be behind, although, yeah, they're going to probably be behind against Indianapolis. So, good play.
Yes. I like it. So, two value plays I want to talk about for wide receiver. The first one being Denzel Mims, 4,100 versus the Raiders. At that 47-point game total where the Jets are going to be 7.5-point underdogs. Mims averaging 9.1 DraftKings points per game, 6.5 targets per game. Just a very solid matchup against the Raiders in a game they should be trailing. Darnold coming back, I do think it helps Mims a lot here. I'd rather have Sam Darnold throwing to him rather than Joe Flacco. So, and yeah, like I mentioned, the Jets should be coming from behind here. So I do think there's going to be some decent opportunity for Mims. And 4,100, it's pretty cheap still. I think they priced him a decent amount from last week, but still 4,100 is still really cheap. I think there's some solid upside, although he is on the Jets and Darnold is throwing to him.
5% owned. He's fairly well down there at 5% owned, so good opportunity there. Perryman has been playing well. Maybe that helps Mims. And Jamison Crowder just, he's not performed. I'm not so sure because he performed so well early. He had some 100-yard receiving games. But maybe it was because these other guys were out, and he was the only guy. And, he had a great game. Jason Crowder had a great games last year, and really had a lot of targets, a lot of catches. But these two guys, Perryman and Mims, are taking over right now. So he's a tempting play right here at 5%. That is of Mims.
Yeah, very. And it's so cheap, so it really does not need much to really go off there. All right. So the last play I do want to talk about is going to be Kiki Kuti, 3,500.
I hope you were going to bring him up.
Yes. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I don't think I can. Kuti, I think it's pronounced. But, yeah, you got the 51.5-point game total where the Texans are 3-point underdogs, and he's averaging only 5.6 DraftKings points in 3 games this year. But, like we mentioned, Fuller suspended, Stills was cut, Cobb's on the IR, giving Kuti a ton of opportunity here. He's going to be the wide receiver, too, at 3,500. And like I mentioned, I'm really liking this cheap Texan stack this week. And Kuti in general, like 3,500, you really don't need much. Him being the wide receiver, too, with a great quarterback in Deshaun Watson. I think there's some really solid upside here. So really curious to hear the ownership and seeing how many people are going to be on this one.
Third most owned wide receiver at 15.5%. And like you said, wow. $3,500. He's a really tempted guy to get in some of your lineups. He could end up with some underneath patterns where he end up catching 5+ receptions and just racking up the points even without scoring a touchdown. If Cooks, he's at 5,600. He's pretty cheap himself. So it'd be interesting to try and stack Watkins with Kuti, because he's at $3,500, but Cooks is is not that high, not that expensive. So, but I probably will still try and sneak Kuti in a few of my cash lineups, and maybe I play one GPP and put him in or something. But yeah, that's really high owned. I mean, people are recognizing that this guy has an opportunity to score some fantasy points this week, and we'll see how that works out for him. And when we get to tight ends, remind me we need to talk about the tight ends for Houston, who may also get some increased touches.
Yes, for sure. Was there anybody else you wanted to throw out for wide receiver?
No, that's all I had. I had Kuti, if I'm pronouncing it. Bob Harris keeps trying to get me to pronounce his name properly, and I think I'm going to have to take lessons in the off season because I don't think I have learned how to pronounce his name. So, yeah, that's pretty much it of any sneaky plays that I have off the top of my head.
Awesome. So, moving into tight ends here, and Darren Waller, 6,100 versus the Jets. Got the 47-point game total where the Jets are 7.5-point underdogs. So he did disappoint big time last week versus Atlanta. He got a lot of people. He got me included. But another great matchup here against the Jets. What I like about Waller is going to get a ton of volume, averaging a little bit over 8 targets per game. And I really don't hate a Carr-Waller stack, but most likely if I do play Waller, I'm just going to be playing him by himself. And honestly, there's so much value at tight end this week where I'm really not looking to go up and play a tight end. But if I was to, I would be playing Waller at 6,100.
Yeah, that's a big number of a salary, but obviously he's been playing well. And the team had a bad week last week. He's the third most owned tight end at 12.2%. So I'm not sure what that says. What does that say to you, Brady?
I mean, as expected. I mean, I think it was the highest owned or second highest owned last week. So just kind of around where I expected to be, really.
Yeah. That's a big salary, but I guess that's the way it goes. He has been a consistent player. He kind of had a slump there. He wasn't scoring touchdowns. Let me just quickly look at his stats from last week. He had 7 targets. He only caught 4 balls for 23 yards. So he only had 6.3 PPR points last week. I'm sure that stung a bit. But against the Jets, he's the man there. And I think you can't really take that last week as a trend.
Yeah, very true. So this next play is really interesting, and we have Dallas Goedert 4,300 versus Green Bay at the 47-point game total, where the Packers are 9-point favorites. Fantastic matchup for Goedert here, and Goedert is averaging 12.1 DraftKings points per week. Great runback option from the Packers stack that I like. Last week he did have 10 targets, 7 receptions, to score 20.5 DraftKings points at 4,200. And week 11 against Cleveland had 6 targets, 5 receptions, scored 18.7. So he's been playing really well as of late. I know he's been struggling earlier in the season, but he had some injury concerns, all that. I think that's in the past. And 4,300 seems way too cheap here for Goddard.
Yeah, he's really finally putting it together. Ertz is back. I don't really think that's going to kill him. They've got 2 tight end scenarios in their offense, so he's about the 8th owned tight end at 3.9%. So he's not heavily loaned. Nice. They're going into Green Bay. I'm a little surprised. Maybe it's going into Green Bay. Maybe it's Ertz coming back, but I think that's a little low owned for this guy. What do you think?
Yeah, that's honestly kind of surprising there, especially how well he's been playing. I mean, he has like 40 DraftKings points just about in the past 2 weeks combined. So, yeah, very interesting there.
Fascinating.
All right, so next play here, Robert Tonyan. Very interesting here, 3,700 versus the Eagles, 47-point game total where the Packers are 9-point favorites. And surprisingly, Tonyan's averaging 12.5 DraftKings points per week. And the Eagles really do struggle versus the tight end, giving up the 8th most DraftKings points to tight ends this year. And yeah, it just seems way too cheap for the matchup and how well Tonyan's been playing. I don't mind Rodgers and Tonyan in a stack together. And just a cheap punt tight end play with some solid upside against this Eagles defense here.
Yeah, let's take a look at his ownership. He's 4.3% owned. He is the 5th most owned tight end, but there's a huge drop off the top 3, and so he's not that heavily owned coming into what is he playing? It's a Philadelphia game at home against Philadelphia. That's tempting.
Yes, but this next guy is probably where I'm going to go in most of my lineups, and that is going to be Anthony Firkser, 2,500, the minimum price tight end here, going against Cleveland. And as we know, I love targeting tight ends versus Cleveland. They're really bad at covering them. They're really bad in the passing game in general. I think last year they were dead last against tight end. This year they're not much different there. They are going to be missing Ward, so I do think their defense is going to be hurting really bad this week in the passing game. And at Firkser 2,500, Smith is going to be out, I believe, making Firkser a really good play here, really good pump play. You really don't need much at 2,500, but I actually think there's some solid upside here. So, like Firkser a lot, I think I'm going to plug him in cash. I think I'm going to have him in a lot of tournaments as well.
Yeah, you've got an extremely low salary with an opportunity, and Juno Smith is out. There's no question about it. 13% owned, though. People are on to this. He has had a big game this year with Smith being hurt. So that's good and bad. People are on to him, but he can play. He can perform. And boy, yeah, he's with the frustration at tight end to try and pull out a good tight end in DFS. I got to put him in a few of your lineups. Boy, I'm staring at this 2,500, and it's just sweet.
Yeah.
And we know he's playing against Cleveland, and Juno Smith is out. So opportunity knocks.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, he's going to be my highest owned tight end personally. So you wanted to talk about the Texans tight ends.
Yeah, Jordan Aikens right now is the number 2 owned tight end. Well, actually, he's tied with Firkser at 13.1%. Firkser, whatever. I can't pronounce names anymore. But yeah, he's the word is they're going to throw to the tight end to make up for the loss of Fuller, and he's been back for a few weeks from injury, so 2,900 is his salary. What do you think about him as a play this week, Brady?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of upset with him because he literally dropped 2 touchdowns on Thanksgiving, and I did really well on Thanksgiving, and it would have done even better if he would have caught like one of those touchdowns. I mean, they're like hands, so man. So kind of upset with him, but yeah, 2,900. He should get more targets. I mean, the touchdown upside's there. We saw it on Thanksgiving. Just catch the ball, dude. Come on, But yeah, I think it's a fine play there.
Now, don't get into the old man, pissed off at players and then never go back to them. I've done that. That's one of my big Achilles heels. Is I remember stuff from way back, and sometimes you just got to clear the mind and let the guy play. But yeah, it's still fun when you see drop touchdowns. That especially when you put the guy in your lineup. But yeah, opportunity though, definitely an opportunity. 2,900 is not a bad salary to get this guy in a few of your lineups.
Yep, stacking option with Deshaun Watson there as well, so I like it.
Yeah, that's the only one I really had that I wanted to make sure we talked about at the tight end position.
Okay, sweet. You did mention Rudolph, I think.
Oh, yes, I did mention Rudolph. Where is he at? Now, he was a good play last week. I forget whether we talked about him or not, but he's at 3.9%. And Smith's out again. You're at Jacksonville, so I mean you got to consider Kyle Rudolph somewhere at basically just a little under 4% at $3,400 salary because he did score I think it was 14 fantasy points last week without a touchdown. So, what do you think, Brady?
Yeah, definitely don't hate that. I mean, personally, I'd probably go down to like Aikens or to a Firkser, but yeah, Rudolph, especially if I was doing a Kirk Cousins stack. I think Rudolph's definitely a cheap option to help, make that lineup work there. So, yep, Rudolph is good, especially with
Aikens and Anthony Firkser are lower owned, or excuse me, not lower owned, higher owned, but their salary is lower than his. So you have to go up in salary to play Rudolph, but he's owned at only 3.9%. So he may be a GPP player at a low percentage owned, of your
very true there.
Of your shares. Excuse me. So, yeah, thanks for reminding me about Rudolph. I forgot about him.
No problem. Wanted to bring him up there. All right, so for defenses, we'll touch on quickly. Obviously, if you want to pay up for defense up top, I think going with the Dolphins is not a bad idea. And like the Dolphins have been scoring touchdowns this year, averaging 9.3 DraftKings points per week. They do have 3 touchdowns on the year, 11 interceptions, 25 sacks. So they've been doing really good this year. One against the Cincinnati offense, missing Joe Burrow, missing, I believe, Joe Mixon. So I do think the Dolphins will be fine. I think the Seahawks are really interesting going against the Giants, who is going to be missing Daniel Jones, I believe. So, yeah, the offense, I think the Seahawks defense is not great, but just a really good matchup there. Other than that, I'm probably paying down a lot of defense this week. Nothing really sticks out to me too much. I think I'm going to go to believe it or not, the Jets at 2,100. Not the best defense in the world, but 2,100, they really don't need much. It allows you to get other pieces in your offense.
The Jets?
Averaging 4 DraftKings points per week. I would be happy with 4 to 6 DraftKings points because it allows me to go up and get other pieces in my lineup there. So, yeah, probably the Jets for me. Another cheap defense you can look at is the Falcons against the Saints offense without a Drew Brees. With Taysom Hill at quarterback is something you can look at. I do think there maybe is turnover upside. So yeah, there's some of the defense I'm looking at there. But yeah, probably going to pay down for the Jets in a lot of lineups, honestly.
The Jets at 1.2% owned, so interesting GPP play. Seattle's been playing better. They're number one owned at 13%, but they're 3,300 salary against the Giants, and like you said, most likely the backup's going to be playing Colt McCoy. So that's tempting, 3,300. That's an extra $1,200 up above the Jets, but you would expect more production out of the Seattle defense, in my opinion. So you got some interesting, of course, Miami's always been scoring, but they're at 4,400, so you're paying for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's four interesting defenses. Atlanta, it's scary for me to play against New Orleans right now. They're playing well, but, you do have, the new quarterback in there. Maybe he can make a mistake, although he runs most of the damn time. So, yeah, those are interesting. I'm going to have to think about the Jets long and hard in the next couple of hours. That's an interesting game. I'll probably try and sneak Seattle in if I can afford them. Like you said, you're trying to save some money at defense. That's so I like those plays. Those are going to be fun.
Yeah, if I was to rank them, I'd probably go Seattle number 1, probably go the Jets number 2, probably go the Dolphins number 3. And the Falcons number 4 there.
Yeah, the Falcons are 2,400, so they're down close to the Jets' salary. So. Fantastic! I apologize for talking so much. We almost went over an hour here, or 55 minutes.
That's good.
Excellent inputs. Excellent inputs for our listeners. Any other things you'd like to bring up?
No, I'm really excited for this slate. I think it's going to be really interesting to see where all the ownership's going to go. I mean, lots of ownership on Dalvin Cook, lots of ownership on Derrick Henry. I think it's going to be interesting with a very, very shocky Brandon Cooks number 1 high owned. It should be a fun week here.
Yeah, I may have to put a little. I only put like 2 or 3 lineups in last week, and in my 50-50 strategies, and I put a couple GBP in for 10 cents just for the heck of it. But I may have to do maybe 5 or 6 $1 today because of these variations that we've talked about today. There's some interesting guys out there that I may have to mix a few more lineups in just to get some more plays in. So, fantastic.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, great show, and good luck this week, and good luck to our listeners. It should be a fun week 13. These are fun weeks when we get down to 13 through 16 when, it's very interesting with the, people trying to make the teams trying to make the playoffs, and that helps us trying to figure out, sometimes it helps us and sometimes it doesn't, but fun stuff.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brady.